This podcast is intended for a mature audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome back to Legend of the Bones. Following in the footsteps of giants, Legend of the Bones is a chimera. A mix of old-school tabletop RPG and dark fantasy storytelling. As its name might suggest, in Legend of the Bones the dice rule. There'll be no rerolls, no fudging the dice, no metacurrency. The roll of the bones will determine the character's destiny, and no one will be spared their fate. None shall escape the destiny of bone. Last time on Legend of the Bones. Following Brother Cadfael's collapse due to an apparent cardiac arrest, the novitiate, Jenna, saved the monk's life by praying for a cure-light wounds miracle. The goddess Naya answered her call, and at the same time bestowed upon her the Word, marking her as a true cleric. After Cadfael had been revived, Valen ascertained that the monk, who was otherwise in good health, had been possibly poisoned, given that his symptoms were consistent with the effects of hemlock, and remembered that they had seen a black-haired monk clearing this toxic plant in the pasture on the day of their arrival at Idis Gwyn. From the description, Cadfael identified the monk as Brother Aldwin, a man who had been sponsored by Wiglaf to join the community 2 years previously, and shortly after his arrival, the old abbot had died when his heart had failed. After Lena and Brother Ranulf had returned from the Great Library, Ranulf relayed that he had seen Aldwin talking to Reynard of Harburg when the cleric had come to the Blessed Isle, and also revealed that Brother Aldwin had been sent by Abbot Wiglaf to work in the kitchen that morning, and that he had also been spotted taking a sack into the brewhouse. Wishing to uncover evidence, the companions went to the brewhouse, which was situated away from the monastery. As they approached the building, the companions heard a disturbance from within, and when Beric threw open the door, he was confronted by the lurid scene of an assault in progress. Chapter 39, Part 1. Day 38, Late Afternoon. Party status: Beric, 36 out of 37 hit points. Lena, 26 out of 26 hit points. Valen, 17 out of 17 hit points. Talion, 21 out of 21 hit points. Canute, 23 out of 24 hit points. Jenna, 12 out of 12 hit points. Spells available: Valen has memorized Push, Shield, Soothe, and Revive. Talion has memorized Poetic Prose, Resolve, and Pitch. Lena can pray for 1 first-level miracle and 2 second-level miracles. The pungent, earthy aroma of boiling wort filled Beric's nostrils as he stepped across the threshold of the brewhouse. Smoke and steam mixed together, filling the single room of the building with a hazy fog. At the far end of the room, the docile-looking oxen that was yoked to the millstone shook its head in irritation at the fume. It lowed pitifully, then licked its nose with its long tongue. But Beric's eyes were drawn beyond the kiln and the boiling pan of wort, and having heard a disturbance from outside, the big man was shocked by what he witnessed. There, a pot-bellied man, presumably the brewer, Brother Frioch, was bound to a chair, while another man, cowled in a monk's habit, forced ale down his throat. Much of the liquid cascaded over Frioch's face and neck, soaking his habit and leather apron as he coughed and spluttered. Frioch's eyes were wide in terror as he writhed and squirmed, but it was to no avail. His bonds were too tight, and his assailant forced him to swallow by pinching his nose. The would-be assassin turned sharply upon hearing the door, dropping the pitcher, which smashed upon the earthen floor. His cowl fell from about his head, to reveal a mop of black hair and an angular face. His cold blue eyes locked with Beric's, and the warrior recognised the man as the monk they had seen cutting the hemlock, Brother Aldwin. What happens next will be down to whether Aldwin is surprised by Beric's sudden entrance, and potentially whoever wins the initiative. Aldwin does not have a chance in combat against the party, so he will try to escape through the rear exit, but only if he can act first. Let's find out. As they heard a disturbance, I'm going to rule that the party are not surprised, but let's see if Aldwin is. A roll of 1 or 2 on a d6 will mean he is surprised. A 6. Aldwin must have seen the PCs approaching from the window. Now to roll initiative. Aldwin. A 6. The party. A 1. Well, that is so decisive. I'm going to rule that Aldwin will have time to draw and throw his dagger before making a run for it. Let's resolve his attack first. With his dexterity bonus, Aldwin will need to roll a 13 or more to hit the warrior. An 8. In one swift motion, the assassin pulls a dagger concealed up his sleeve and throws it towards Beric. But in his haste, his aim is not true, and the blade harmlessly thuds into the doorframe a few inches from Beric's head. Then, before the warrior can react, the assassin turns and runs out of the open back door. Pursuit. Way back in episode 6, I established pursuit rules for an urban environment, which I am going to slightly adapt for this situation. The first step is to compare movement rates, and apply a modifier if there is a difference. Beric's armour reduces his movement rate by half, so on that basis, I will apply a -2 to Beric's movement roll. Next, I need to establish Aldwin's head start as a numerical value from 1 to 12. The distance between the front and back doors is just 20 feet, so I'm going to set the distance between the two men at 2. Step 3 is to roll initiative, but I have already done this for the first round. Step 4 is when actions are taken, but again, Aldwin has taken his action by throwing his dagger. Beric will shout back to his companions,
"Rather back!"
Step 5 is the core pursuit mechanic, the move. A d6 is rolled for both the pursuer and the pursued, with modifiers applied. If the pursuer wins, the difference is subtracted from the distance. If the pursued wins, the difference is added to the distance. If the distance falls to 0, then the pursued has been caught. If the distance reaches 12, the pursued has escaped. Let's roll for the move now. Aldwin. A 2. Beric. A modified 2. The distance remains at 2. Steps 3 to 5 are then repeated, until the pursued is either caught or has escaped. However, for every 6 rounds, both sides must make a constitution check. A failed roll will apply a -1 to their move rolls for the remainder of the pursuit. Penalties for further failed constitution checks are cumulative. Round 2. Initiative. Aldwin. A 2. The party. A 6. Beric reaches the door and sees Aldwin crossing the cobbled yard. Drawing his own dagger, he throws it at his quarry. Aldwin's armour class is 12, but I am going to apply a -2 penalty as both men are running, meaning the warrior will need to roll a 14 or more to hit. A 3. The big man's aim is wildly inaccurate, and his dagger clatters impotently on the cobblestones. Aldwin takes no action. Meanwhile, Lena and Jenna have moved inside the brewhouse to attend to Brother Friok. Canute, Valen and Talion, following Beric's instruction, begin to move around the building to intercept Aldwin. But will they go the right way? Aldwin will head towards the woodland. A simple high-low roll on a d20 will determine if the companions make the right choice. A low means they will. A 9. That's good enough. Now rolling for movement. Aldwin. A 4. Beric. A modified 3. The distance increases to 3. Round 3. Initiative. Aldwin. A 5. The party. A 6. Beric scoops his dagger from the ground as he runs. Aldwin exits the yard through an open archway in the wall and turns south, following the stream towards the woodland. Rolling for movement. Aldwin. A 1. Beric. A modified -2. The distance increases to 5. Round 4. Initiative. Aldwin. A 6. The party. A 1. Aldwin wastes no time with an action. However, Canute, Valen and Talion now have the monk in their sights. Valen will attempt to cast Push in an effort to trip the would-be assassin. Valen will need to roll a 17 or less for his casting roll. An 11. The mage unleashes an invisible force, which hits Aldwin in the side, pushing him 7 yards. That will be enough to force him into the stream. Now usually, there is a 3 in 6 chance that the target will be knocked prone, but given the uneven terrain of the stream bed, I'm going to increase this to a 5 in 6 chance. A 6! Would you believe it? Somehow, despite the immense force, Aldwin manages to stay on his feet and makes to climb the far bank. Talion knocks an arrow and attempts to slow Aldwin by shooting him in the leg. Given this is a called shot, I will apply a -2 penalty to the roll, partially offsetting the bard's dexterity bonus. As such, Talion will need to roll an 11 or more to hit. Nat 20! That will be maximum damage plus an additional die. That's 10 points in total. Ouch! Aldwin is a 6th level rogue, and that hit will take him down to 11 hit points. Okay, so because of that critical hit, I am going to apply a -1 penalty to Aldwin's dexterity and his movement for the remainder of the encounter. Talion's arrow flies true, thudding into Aldwin's right calf, shattering his fibula. The assassin screams in pain as his leg buckles. If he did not have his hands on the long tufts of grass on the stream's bank, he would have fallen into the water. As a result, I will rule that Aldwin loses his move this round. Time for Beric's move. A modified 4, which takes the distance down to just 1. Beric sprints forward, leaping into the water of the stream. Round 5. Initiative. Aldwin. A 4. The party. A 3. Given his wound, I am going to make a dexterity check for Aldwin to see if he can climb the bank. With the penalty of his wound, Aldwin would need to roll a 15 or less. A 2. With Beric hot on his heels, the Brethren agent gets an extra kick of adrenaline, which dampens the pain as he swiftly clambers up the slope. Talion knocks another arrow and targets the man's other leg. Once again, the bard will need an 11 or more. A 12 for 3 points of damage. Talion's arrow thuds into the assassin's left thigh. Aldwin cries out once again. The Brethren agent is down to just 8 hit points. Despite that, I'm not going to make a morale check. He is fanatically loyal to the Brethren and will not surrender. Now for the move. I am going to apply another -1 penalty for Aldwin, given the second arrow that's embedded in his leg. Here is the Brethren agent's roll. A modified 1. I will also apply a further -1 to Beric's move this round, as he will need to climb the bank. A modified -2. Beric slips as he climbs out the stream, and the distance increases to 4. Round 6. Time to make constitution checks for both Aldwin and Beric. Both men have a constitution of 14, and will need to roll less than that or take a further -1 penalty on their move. Aldwin first. A 4. Beric. A 3. Both men dig deep and push on. Initiative. Aldwin. A 4. The party. A 3. Aldwin continues to run for the tree line. Talion knocks another arrow, once again aiming for the leg. A 17 is a hit for 2 points of damage as the arrow grazes Aldwin's left calf. The move. Aldwin. A modified 2. Beric. A modified 3. The distance is reduced to 3. Round 7. Initiative. Aldwin. A 1. The party. A 5. Talion knocks another arrow, this time not aiming for a specific part of the body. meaning the bard will need to roll a 9 or more. But a 3 means the arrow flies wide, instead hitting a willow on the riverbank. The move. Aldwin. A modified 2. Beric. A modified 3. The distance is reduced to 2 as the Brethren's agent's wounds begin to take their toll. Both men enter the tree line of the copse, meaning that Talion will no longer be able to target Aldwin. Round 8. Initiative. Aldwin. A 1. Beric. A 2. Given the distance is just 2, Beric stoops down, picking up a large stick, then throws it, hoping to trip his quarry. I will, however, apply a -3 penalty to reflect that both he and Aldwin are running, and because it's an improvised missile. Therefore, the warrior will need to roll a 15 or more to hit. An 18! Okay, so whilst the stick itself will not cause any damage, Aldwin will need to roll a successful dexterity check at a -2 penalty to avoid being tripped. The Brethren agent will need to roll a 14 or less. A 15! The stick catches between Aldwin's legs, causing him to trip and fall prone. As a result, he will miss his move. Can Beric move enough to catch him? The warrior will need to roll at least a modified 2 to close the gap. Here is the roll. A modified 4! Beric runs forward and leaps on his prone quarry. Aldwin struggles under the big man's weight, but to no avail. Beric draws his dagger and growls. Hold still, you piece of filth! There were a couple of times during that pursuit that I was sure that Aldwin would escape. The odds were certainly in his favour with regard to running, and if the other party members had gone the wrong way to intercept him, then the outcome would have likely been different. As it is, the companions have caught the Brethren agent red-handed, so to speak. But with no other witness, Aldwin may claim that it was they and not he that murdered Friok. But is the monk dead? Whilst the pursuit happened, Lena and Jenna rushed to help Brother Friok. Aldwin had been forcing the monk to drink the same poisoned ale, which he had slipped Cadfael. Time to roll Friok's save versus death. The monk will need to roll a 14 or more. A 5. Alas, by the time the two women get to him, Brother Friok is dead, and no miracle can save him. There is of course the possibility that Aldwin has about his person something which might implicate the abbot. Let's ask the oracle. Okay then, time to find out the repercussions. Chapter 39, Part 2, Day 38, Evening. The bell finished marking the 7th hour afternoon, as the monks of the Order of the Blessed Isle entered the chapel, performing the plain song of liturgy. It was an ancient ritual, observed 5 times each day, and now they did so for eventide prayers, as generations of Innisquin's monks had likewise done for centuries. As was customary, Abbot Wiglaf led the procession, holding up in both hands the sacred rod of Solon, a golden staff topped with the symbol of the 9. Some would say it was his privilege, but in truth it was a burden. For 2 years, since his ascension to abbot, the metal had become increasingly hot. It was likewise the same with his holy symbol. It was not usually a problem, for it was conventional to wear the pendant over the habit, in a display of one's faith. But whereas he never used to remove it, now he could no longer bear to wear the symbol at night, lest he wake with blisters upon his chest. He told himself it was a sign of the 9's favour, that he was marked by Solon's fire. The voices that answered his prayers had also changed. Now they enticed him with promises of power and wealth, a just reward for his piety. Wiglaf had ever been a small man. He had always felt overlooked. His body was weak. He was neither handsome nor charismatic. His family poor and humble. He was altogether unremarkable. At least he had been. Reynard had opened his eyes to new possibilities. A future where the truly pious would rightfully rule. A future where he could be something. Be someone. And yes, it might take a little evil. But it was all in the service of the greater good. And the means justified the end. Through Aldwyn, Reynard had cleared his path to becoming abbot. And with that power, he had already managed to economically undermine Lord Petrock. And now he had taken his chance to weaken Conwyn too. He would not mourn Cadfael. Long had the old man been a nuisance. He was too clever for his own good, a popular member of the community, and ever keen to sow the seeds of dissent. But why had he heard nothing of Cadfael's death? No matter. The old man's absence was notable, and it was only a matter of time before his body would be discovered somewhere, perhaps in his cell or field. Then there was just the matter of the outsiders. Reynard had warned him of them. He had been surprised when they had returned from Kerodu, though at least he now had the disc. But now they had broken into the vault. No doubt they had been seeking the knowledge of the Hellstones. They were, after all, heathens and heretics. Especially the woman, Lena. When Reynard's plan came to fruition, he would see her burn in Solon's pyre. The procession and the singing stopped as the abbot reached the altar and placed the sacred rod upon it. The monks fanned out and took to standing in neat rows. Wiglaf turned to the congregation.
"Let us pray,"
he commanded, as he reluctantly placed his hands upon his holy symbol. But before he could begin, the doors to the chapel opened once again. The assembled monks all turned their heads at the unexpected interruption. The abbot stood there for several moments, dumbfounded at what he witnessed.
"No."
Wiglaf is about to get an unpleasant surprise, and how this goes will depend on whether he can keep his cool. I am going to make a wisdom check for the abbot, but given this will take him off guard, I am going to apply a -2 penalty to the roll, meaning that he will need to roll a 14 or less to succeed. A 16. I also need to make a check against Canute and Lena's charisma, the result of which will get played out in the narrative. First, the Skarne warrior needs to roll a 15 or less. A 3. Lena will need to roll a 13 or less. A 12. Okay then. Chapter 39, Part 3, Day 38, Evening. Party status. The party status is unchanged. Beric strode purposefully into the chapel, his companions following behind. The big man pushed the captured Aldwyn forward, down the aisle created by the monks on either side of the nave. Many stood with mouths agape, not least because Aldwyn was one of them, but because the last time an armed group transgressed the chapel was during the Skarne raids, which many of the community bitterly remembered, and here among this group was one such man. Aldwyn, his hands bound, no longer bled from his many wounds. These had been healed by Cadfael, though the Brethren agent was left walking with a limp, which was evident as he hobbled along, the man's face full of resentment.
"Heathens!"
Wiglaf screamed aloud.
"Heretics! How dare you defile this holy place with your presence?"
The abbot screeched in frenzy, spittle spraying from his mouth as the companions reached where he was standing. Beric, now holding Aldwyn by the scruff of his habit, stood to one side as Canute came forward, towering over the abbot, who against the huge Skarne looked even smaller than before.
"Shut your mouth,"
Canute snarled, before adding menacingly,
"It's been a long time since a monk died on my blade."
The venom of Canute's words silenced the abbot, who let out a whimper. Wiglaf looked desperately to Ranulf for support, but the big monk simply looked on impassively. The abbot gulped, forcing himself to take on a more conciliatory tone, yet his voice remained unsteady.
Pray, why do you interrupt our prayers? And what has happened to poor Brother Aldwin?
I shall answer that,
Lena said aloud, turning so that the whole congregation could hear.
I am Lena of Godsport, humble servant of the Blessed Nine. May Our Lady Mithra strike me down if I speak falsely.
Then, pointing at Aldwin,
This man conspired to murder brothers Cadfael and Friok.
Suddenly, the whole chapel was filled with chatter. After a few moments, Lena raised her arms, and the congregation fell silent.
What nonsense is this?
Wiglaf demanded.
It is true. We caught Aldwin in the act of killing Brother Friok. Alas, we were too late. Brother Friok is dead.
There were gasps in the chapel.
But Aldwin is no monk. He is an assassin who bears the mark of the Brethren of the Purifying Light.
Lena turned to Beric.
Show them.
Beric held Aldwin's left arm aloft and pulled back the sleeve to reveal the tattoo of a blazing sun.
Well then,
Wiglaf interjected, his eyes narrow with guile.
you have clearly done a service in apprehending a murderer. Our community will be safer for it.
Truly. Yet it is strange, is it not?
Lena said, addressing the abbot.
That an agent of the Brethren should come to the Blessed Isle to inexplicably kill monks.
Wiglaf shrugged.
I know not the darkness that lay in the heart of such a man. The Brethren are not a prescribed group. This man is clearly deranged.
Lena approached the abbot, staring at him intently.
Well,
She said softly.
perhaps this shall give us a glimpse into his motivations.
With that, the cleric produced a piece of parchment, and a look of panic spread across the abbot's face.
This,
She announced, holding the parchment aloft and turning back to the assembled monks.
is a note found in Aldwin's possession. A note commanding him to kill Brother Cadfael. A note written by none other than Abbot Wiglaf.
Once again, the congregation broke into intense chatter.
False!
Wiglaf cried. Lena held out the parchment in Ranulf's direction. The big monk came hesitantly forward and took it from the cleric. The commotion in the chapel died down.
This is written in the abbot's hand, and signed with his mark.
Lies!
Wiglaf hissed.
This Scane oaf has the brain of an oxen.
He spat.
For all we know, it was he who conspired with Aldwin to murder Cadfael and Friok. Know we all that the Scane are killers. Once a heathen, always a heathen.
Then, rounding on Lena,
And you are the consort of heathens, an apostate, a whore.
Lena suddenly struck the abbot across the face with an open hand, putting an end to his tirade. She grabbed his left arm, pulling back the sleeve to expose the same mark of the Brethren.
You shame these robes.
She admonished, throwing down his arm. Then reaching for Wiglaf's holy symbol, she snapped the cord.
And you dishonor the Nine.
Wiglaf shrank back, a diminished and pitiful sight.
Brothers!
A voice suddenly called out, and everyone turned to the stairs which led down to the crypt. There, standing alongside Brannock, and 3 of the Reeve's men, was Cadfael. No longer was the monk haggard and drawn. Now he stood tall, and about him was an aura of youthful vigour. There was more commotion as the men came forward.
Brothers!
Cadfael said again, holding his hands up and addressing the congregation.
Too long have we denied our purpose. Too long have we turned our backs on the world and closed our doors to those seeking wisdom and healing on the Blessed Isle. It is time to right that wrong.
Murmurs of agreement rippled through the congregation, with a few notable exceptions. Then Brannock stepped forward, addressing Wiglaf.
There is evidence that you, along with Aldwin, have conspired to commit murder. In the name of Lord Cohen, I command that you will be taken hence to Trevance, where you shall submit to the King's justice.
A flicker of hope sparked in Wiglaf's eyes, and he smiled slyly.
Very well. I have faith that the King's justice will exonerate me from these false claims.
Brannock nodded to his men, who presently escorted Wiglaf and Aldwin out of the chapel, as the 200 monks of Idis Gwyn looked on, still reeling from what had happened.
Well, my friends,
Cadfael said, addressing the companions.
Your coming has truly been a blessing from the Nine. It is my hope that, with time, Idis Gwyn will once again become a beacon of wisdom and a place of solace.
But despite his sanguine remarks, the monk's demeanour quickly became sober once more.
But I fear your trials are far from over. The kingdom faces a great peril. Reynard of Harburg must be stopped, else I fear that the land and the lives of ordinary folk shall be torn asunder.
Thank you for listening to Legend of the Bones. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Now, where would I be without my amazing cast of voice talent? And this episode has a wealth of contributions. Returning in the role of Abbot Wiglaf is Robin Sampson. Robin is the creator of his own hybrid solo play audio drama, Stories from the First Watch, which is firmly on my list of favourite shows. If you like what I do here, then I highly recommend checking it out. Also returning in the role of Cadfael is Dave Patterson. Dave is the host of the wonderful Chimera that is the Frankenstein RPG podcast. Another returning talent, playing Ranulf, is Kevin Conyers. Kevin has a blog with all kinds of OSR goodness at floodedrealms.com. And finally, returning once again in the role of Canute is Jon Cohen, creator of Tale of the Manticore. I'll put all these wonderful folks' links in the show notes. You can also help by liking or reposting new episode announcements, or by recommending the show online or to a friend. You really can't beat the power of word of mouth. Alternatively, if you'd like to show your appreciation by buying me a metaphorical cup of tea, then I have a Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/Legend of the Bones. Any donations will go towards the show's running costs. I would also love to know what you think of the show, and I do respond to every message I receive. So with that in mind, you can contact me on X at LegendBones, Blue Sky at LegendBones, Mastodon at LegendBones at ttrpg-hangout.social, Instagram at LegendOfTheBones, email at legendofthebones@gmail.com, or go to legendofthebones.blogspot.com for show notes, house rules, character profiles, art, maps and more. Join me next time to find out what awaits our adventurers as the bones decide their fate. None shall escape the destiny of Bone.
Reload your three-bladed sword. Get comfortable in your studded leather kirtle or your chainmail bikini. Fire up the wizard van. It's about to get weird. Swords Against Madness is a hybrid storytelling and solo OSR role-playing game experience where I take you through a world of pulpy weird fiction and gonzo OSR role-playing game goodness, as my player characters deal with telepathic squid, crashed spaceships, deranged Cthulhu cultists, immortal space barbarians, and priests worshipping ancient robots. And that's just in the first 2 episodes. Come and party like it's 1974 with Swords Against Madness. Available anywhere where you can download your finest podcast.